Trucker Dump for October 3rd, 2016, episode 117, Hell Week and a Half.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
That's all, folks. Okay, that'll make sense here in a little bit. Todd McCann here. I'm your host of the Trucker Dump. Thanks for joining me today. We call you guys Trucker Dumpers. Hope you don't mind that. Some of you guys chose that over other options, but that's what we're going with. So you're a trucker dumper. Anyway, okay, first, what do I have to tell you? Oh yeah, I was listening to a recent episode of Trucker Dump. I was testing it, and I heard something that was really freaking weird. It just didn't sound right to me, and I could not figure out what it was. Well, what it ended up being was that I had on a mode on my podcast player called Trim Silence. And a lot of podcast players are doing this nowadays where they're taking little pauses and breaks, you know, like in natural speech, and just shortening them ever so slightly to speed up the time, you know, that it takes you to listen to a podcast. Well, I do that for some podcasts, but other ones, I don't do it because I like the way the person talks. I like their cadence. And I was listening to the Trucker Dump that way, and it sucked. It was horrible. Because I do a lot of dramatic pauses, you know, for effect and things like that. Not dramatic, I guess, but, you know, I just have a speech pattern, I think, and maybe it's just me that I'm used to hearing it in my own head, but it just sounded off to me when I had that feature turned on. So if you have it turned on, or if everything kind of seems like I'm really rushing and there's no breaks ever, and like this, then... Not that I'm necessarily talking faster, but that there's no breaks whatsoever. Like if there was no breaks between what I just said right there, you have trim silence or something. It's called something like that in your podcast player. So anyway, if you have that turned on, please turn it off. I would appreciate it. I know you can't listen to the podcast as fast, but come on, really. I only put out one a month. I mean, how much time am I really wasting? So anyway, what do we want to do first here? Okay, I'm thinking there's plenty of you out there who never hear my contact information because you don't listen to the end of the show. Probably a lot of you guys are done listening, maybe right after the blog post portion of this, maybe just after the feedback, maybe you don't want to hear the end of the show, whatever. Anyway, here's my contact info. On Twitter, you can find me. I am at Todd McCann on Twitter. That is 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. I have a email address here at truckerdump@gmail.com. If you have suggestions for the show, comments, questions, anything like that, send it to that address. I am also still looking for questions and suggestions, comments, anything like that for the exercise podcast that is coming up. If you have questions about exercising on the road or anything like that, truckerdump@gmail.com. I'm also still looking for somebody to do a review on the WheelCheck products. This is, you can check out the product at wheelcheck.com. I think it's actually wheel-check.com. Link in the show notes anyway. And there's a link to all these contacts also. The thing is with those, it's those little triangular looking things that fit on your lug nuts and tell you if a lug nut is loose or not. I've been offered to have a chance to review those, but I have a company truck. I can't put them on this truck, so I'm looking for an owner-operator who might be willing to review them and give me like a short audio review of it, 2-3 minutes or less, something like that. Just something simple, see if they work, see how easy they were to install, that kind of a thing. Again, truckerdump@gmail.com if you're up for that. What else? I have been, one thing I've mentioned before, but I'm not sure, so I'll do it again, is I have been putting links to all of these everything I mention in the podcast that I say, links in the show notes. Well, I realize not everybody has a podcast player to get show notes. So I have started putting those in the actual blog post on the abouttruckdriving.com page. So it'll be abouttruckdriving.com. Like this would be episode 117. Just find that in the blog post and look at the bottom. And after the article, you will see all of the links here. I hope that helps you out if you're looking for something, because I know a lot of you guys don't like keep podcasts on your phones or wherever you're listening, and so you don't have the show notes handy. And I don't honestly think most people even know that show notes exist, but they do. If you do have a podcast player like the Apple player or basically any podcast player now will support clickable links. Just, I don't know, somewhere in there you might have to swipe left or right, whatever, you will find show notes, and there are clickable links in there for all this stuff. Also, we have the iTrucker Slack group. That's for Apple geeks, people who like to, well, not just geeks, but people who just enjoy the products and services and want to talk about them a lot. If you're interested in that, Slack is kind of like a glorified chat group. So contact Trucker Bob over there. Me and him are both administrators over there. You can contact him at itruckers@icloud.com, and he will send out an invite request to you. Just download the Slack app, which is free on any system, and sign up for that if you're an Apple nerd. But you know what? I've been thinking about something. I've been thinking that's kind of exclusive. You know, I keep announcing this group where, you know, I can talk to a bunch of my friends, people who listen to this show, who are also Apple nerds, and they get together and we just have a blast over there in that Slack group. I'm in there a lot more than I am Twitter now and anywhere else. And I've always said that I don't do Facebook. Well, I know, sit down. I don't want you to fall over or anything, but I'm reconsidering Facebook. Okay, I'm going to let that sink in a second. I hate Facebook, but I'm reconsidering it because I've realized how much I'm missing over there by not having, you know, the ability for people who come across a podcast to like it and send it to their friends and all that kind of stuff. Oh boy, truck just fired up right next to me. Don't know if you can hear it or not. Oh God, I'm doing it again. I'm talking about sound quality. Anyway, I'm going to kill this until he shuts up. Actually, the guy next to me I parked next to him specifically today because his truck was broke down and it wouldn't run. But I guess now he's getting it fixed and they're revving the crap out of it. So anyway, I'm going to shut this down for a bit. Be back in a sec. You won't even know I'm gone. Okay, the truck is still running, but they're not revving the piss out of it anymore like a Ferrari. So they are putting some tools away and stuff. Hope you can't hear that. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, I dropped the bombshell of Facebook. Okay, here's the thing though. I'm not going to do it if nobody's going to go over there. So I want to hear from you guys. Are you at all interested in having a community of Trucker Dump listeners where you can talk about trucking things back and forth and just chat in general? If you're interested in that, please email me, truckerdump@gmail.com, and tell me. If I don't get enough interest in this thing, I'm not going to do it because, let's be honest, I don't really need or want another social media outlet, but I really want to spread word of the podcast, and it's not spreading as fast as I would like it to. So I guess if you don't want to join a Facebook page, you could always just tell all your friends. That would work just the same. Actually, it'd probably be better. But anyway, if you're interested in having a Facebook Trucker Dump group, let me know. truckerdump@gmail.com. Now, get up off the floor. Okay, I also wanted to give out a little shout to 3 people who left iTunes reviews for Trucker Dump, and I always appreciate those. Clive Hammett, who is on Twitter at Clive_Hammett. That's 2 M's and 2 T's. Link in the show notes. Kevin, who is at Kevin Thompson S1. Link in the show notes to him also on Twitter. I've been talking to Kevin quite a bit through the direct message portion of Twitter. He's a fun guy. It's kind of hard to understand him sometimes because he uses an Android headset and he uses a headset with the Android system and, you know, well, Siri kind of sucks too when it comes to dictation. All of them do. But it's just kind of funny, some of the things that come through, some of the way they come through. I can understand them, but it's just kind of funny. But we're having fun in there. So if you want to direct message me on Twitter, I'm at Todd McCann. Like I said, 2 D's, 2 C's, 2 N's. And I also got another iTunes review from a guy named Kenneth Summerlin. And for some reason, that name sounds familiar to me, but I cannot place it. So I'm not sure if I know you, Kenneth. If I do, thanks for the review. Anyway, appreciate it. Also, I got one new book review from Geek Dad's Computer Service. Don't know who that is, but I appreciate it. It just says, great, informative, funny book. Funny, all capitals. Oh, that's awesome. He says this book, it was an awesome in-depth look at the industry, and Todd McCann has a hilarious writing style. I can't wait for his second book. Well, I can't wait for the second book either. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I'm working on it. Anyway, 5-star review. I appreciate that. Check out, if you don't know what book I'm talking about, I wrote a book called Trucking Life, an entertaining yet informative guide to becoming and being a truck driver. And I'm getting lots of 5-star reviews on Amazon. Well, I don't know, 4 reviews. Can that be considered a lot? I'm going to say it's a lot. Anyway, I've gotten some email from people who have really enjoyed it. So if you want to support the show, or you just want something to listen to for 9.25 hours, it's 9 hours, 15 minutes long. You can read it, actually, but there's a 9-hour, 15-minute long. Have I said that 3 times now? Yeah, I think I have. There's an audiobook. There's a link to an audiobook in the text version. So you can download that, and you got 9 hours of listening time on the road. Lucky you. Anyway, I was also thinking, for some of you people who don't want to buy the book, but you might want to support the show, I have now set up a little tip jar. It's a donate button on the right-hand side of the website. About halfway down, you'll see it says donate. You can just give any amount you want in there, or you can just continue to listen for free. Either way, I'm happy. But some people have suggested that they want to support the show some, and some people even bought my book just because they wanted to support me, even though they didn't really need the book or want to read the book. So I just thought, well, why do they need to want to buy a book when they could just leave a little bit in the tip jar? And I do have costs for this. I have a couple of different domains for this website, and I've got the hosting costs, of course. So if you want to do that, abouttruckdriving.com, tip jar. It's not really called a tip jar, but it is a donate button over in the right hand bar, whatever the heck that thing's called. All right. Later on in the show, we're going to hear from feedback from Clint, from Brian, from Bird Dog, and a fun one from Jack. So stay tuned for that. But first, let's get to and we're already, 10, 15 minutes into the show. Anyway, just a couple things that have been going on in my personal life. My nephew Jared has started driving now. He's got his learner's permit. It's kind of funny because the evil overlord went and picked him up, him and his older brother Jacob, to go do some back to school shopping, and she let Jared drive, and he was driving all through town. He was driving out on the highway. He was driving at highway speeds. He was just driving all over the place, and the evil overlord was just guiding him along. I mean, that's a good teacher to have. She's got 9 years of trucking experience, so it was fun for her. But then she got back home and was telling her sister about, I let Jared drive today, and she's, oh, really? Where'd you go? And, oh, I let him drive down to Arkansas, and he drove, through the parking lots at the mall, and his mom was just like, what? I've only been letting him drive on, like the 25 mile an hour back streets and everything. Well, of course, Jared didn't tell the evil overlord this. He just, let her drive. He was just like, hey, I'll drive wherever you want me to drive. So, that was just kind of funny. But I just wanted to warn you all to stay out of Southwest Missouri, because Jared is on the road now and nobody's really safe. So just a fair warning. Another thing that's happening that's kind of funny is we have a cat named Hammy. He's a little distorted. He's truly incest. So he's a product of incest. So he's a little weird. You can pet him and love him, and then the next second he will just be biting you hard and scratching the heck out of you. So you kind of got to be careful with him, but he's a little weird. Anyway, in typical Todd fashion, he is now an Apple junkie. He is addicted to our iPhones. That's what's really weird. I was home one weekend and the Evil Overlord was still working, and I was there with just the boys, and we were trying to play Pandemic, which is a really fun collaborative board game, and we had it up on the table, and Hammy kept getting up on the table with us, and I was trying to distract him, so I bought this little fish app by Friskies or whoever it is, and put it on my phone and set it there so he could watch it. And what it is, it's just these little, animated fish that swim around, and then when he reaches up and tap them, they swim off real fast. And it's supposed to, kind of excite it. Well, he wasn't really interested in that app that much. It occupied him for a little bit. At one point, he tried to pick it up and kind of throw it across the table. But I didn't think anything more about it. But then I told the Evil Overlord about it later on, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." So she, started looking up all these games for the cat, and they got all the ones where like these little animated mice pop in and out of this hunk of Swiss cheese, and they're there 1 second and they vanish the next, and it has fascinated Hammy. I have sit there watched him personally, this is no exaggeration, for an hour. He will sit there and he will reach out and tap it every once in a while, and then he will just stare at it for like 15 minutes. Eventually, he gets a little frustrated with it. He will pick up the phone with his claws. He will toss it across the room. He will eventually get pissed at it because he can't get to the mice, and he will get up and jump and kind of have this mean attitude. It's just kind of funny because I feel the same thing when I'm playing some iPhone games sometimes, or when my iPhone is acting up. I just get frustrated with it, and I get pissed, and I just want to walk away from it, and it's just kind of funny that we have a cat who is now addicted to our iPhone. He actually even tries to, when we're using our iPhones, he will reach his paw up and put his paw on top of the phone and try to pull it away from us so he can play with it. So anyway, we're thinking about getting him a cheap Android tablet that is nice and big. You can get those things for $50 now. So we're thinking about getting him one of those. That way he won't waste all of our battery life, and he won't be trying to steal our phones out of our hands, hopefully. Anyway, I've included a picture, link in the show notes, to him staring at the screen. It's just kind of funny. Okay, one other funny thing I saw, and there's a link to it in the show notes also, is a picture I took of this sign down when I was in Arizona, right on the Mexican border. And I thought it was funny no matter what, but it's even funnier because it's on the Mexican border. And it reads, the name of the company is called Expeditors, but their tagline is, "You'll be surprised how far we'll go for you." Now, maybe it's just me, but I find that totally hilarious. I mean, here they are on the Mexican border where people are constantly trying to smuggle themselves in, and get across into America. And they have a tagline that says, "You'll be surprised how far we'll go for you." Okay, what are you going to do? Stick me in the back of your truck and, haul me across to Oklahoma or something? I just thought it was pretty funny. And for proof, because nothing exists if you didn't, if you don't have proof of pictures. So I took a picture of it and it's up there. So check that out. And now I have a bit of great news for you. You remember Steven Gorman from episode 111 from about improving your reputation as truckers? He's the one who actually co-hosted with me. He also sent in an audio review of the book last episode. Anyway, him and his wife, Shannon, had a little girl. It was either September 9th or 10th. I'm not sure. Either he waited a whole day and sent it to me, or he sent it like 5 minutes after the kid was born. So I think it was probably born on, I think the baby was probably born on September 9th, and he sent me the picture on the 10th. I don't think I'm that important in his life. Although I'm pretty sure he was going to name it Todd, but since it came out a girl, Toddette, there's not much of a ring to that, so they went with Aubree Lin, which is a lovely name. So congratulations to Steve and Shannon. Enjoy that kid. Okay, this is a update. I didn't want to re-record the whole thing because I'm lazy. Aubree Lin was born on September the 10th, so I was right. I did get a picture right after she was born, so I'm feeling pretty special about that. Thanks, Steven. And again, enjoy that child until she's a teenager. And then I feel sorry for you. Okay, now for the bad news. I believe I may have told you earlier, my blog post was 5,100 words. Yes, that's about double what I normally write, so that means you'll have to listen to me longer. I do apologize. But here it is in all its glory, Hell Week and a half. We all have bad weeks at work. I call them Hell Weeks. I've written about 2 of them before over at Trucker Dump 26 and Trucker Dump 71. The difference between a hell week for the average Joe Blow and a trucker is that when a non-trucker has a bad week, they usually have other people around to lighten the mood. Friends will rib you about being a sourpuss, children will do something silly to make you smile, and any spouse worth their salt will listen to you vent and provide an appropriate amount of sympathy, even if they do think you're being a drama queen. But as an over-the-road trucker, you're out here on the road all alone. Your dispatcher certainly doesn't want to hear you moaning about your crappy week. Sure, you can always call your spouse, but it's not quite the same as getting a shot of understanding and a big hug from them in person. And I hate to break it to you, but the whole time you're telling your ride-along dog about your bad week, while he may look interested, he's probably only hoping that you're about to present him with a bowling ball-sized wad of bacon. Speaking of bacon, my most recent hell week started with a pig. Well, actually it started a bit before that, but I just couldn't pass up that segue opportunity. So let's set the stage. I had just spent Labor Day weekend at home doing nothing more special than sitting around on the couch watching Netflix with the evil overlord and playing the solo campaign of an old Halo game I never got around to playing years ago. For the record, I suck at first-person shooters. And if you think I'm exaggerating, have a listen to my conversation with my nephew Jared in Trucker Dump 110, Jabbering With Jared. Link in the show notes. By the way, there's a link to the first 2 hell weeks in the show notes also. I get a call on Monday and my dispatcher needs me to go rescue a load from a guy at the new Flying J truck stop in Springfield, Missouri. I threw everything together, loaded up the truck, and headed out. After swapping trailers with the driver, I ran in to look around at the new truck stop. Now, I can usually pass the Cinnabon stand with only mild regret, but this place also had Auntie Anne's pretzels. Uh-oh. I would have probably been fine, only I noticed they were just pulling some fresh ones out of the oven. So 5 minutes later, I'm driving down the road and getting cinnamon sugar all over my truck. That stuff is like sand at the beach. Well, that sounds like the start of a great week, right? Well, hang on. I delivered near Dallas at 10 p.m. that evening and bobtailed to our nearby company terminal to find an empty trailer. I still had about 4 hours available to run, but dispatch told me to hit the sack and check in for a load in the morning. I wasn't happy about it, but at least they have good Wi-Fi at our yard. I fired up Netflix and watched an excellent documentary on Winston Churchill called Walking with Destiny and a couple of episodes of World War II in color. And the Brits will be happy to see that they spelled color correctly with a U. Anyway, these are things the evil overlord had been telling me about. There'll be a link in the show notes to both those shows. I woke up at 7:30 a.m. the following morning, refreshed and ready to roll. That's when I found out my next load doesn't pick up until 8:30 p.m. Oh boy. Now for all you non-truckers out there, this is a scenario we truckers face all the time. We're rested and ready to go, but our load isn't. So what do we do now? Well, we need to be alert and ready to drive for 11 hours starting at 8:30 p.m., but we just slept a full night. And I put the odds of me being able to sleep for another 10 hours on about the same level as me ever consenting to a nipple ring. Now here's the shocking part. Even though I had free Wi-Fi at the yard, instead of binging Netflix all day, I chose to edit my last podcast, Trucker Dump 116. Link in the show notes. Is there some sort of award for self-motivation? Because if there is, someone needs to nominate me for it. Anywho, about 5 p.m., I attempted to take a 3-hour nap. I did manage to sleep a bit, but I tossed and turned more than a dryer full of socks. So that's the official start of this particular Hell Week. Sitting for 20 hours instead of the mandatory 10-hour break, and not getting as much sleep as I would have liked to have had for my 600-plus mile run. I treated myself to an A1 burger at Whataburger, because really, who can pass it up when they're in Texas? Picked up my load, and headed out US 287 towards Denver, Colorado. The pork and the road. See what I did there? I was out in the middle of nowhere between Wichita Falls and Childress, Texas, about 2 a.m. when I saw a pig meandering out into the road. You know how you sometimes find yourself in one of those situations when you're walking towards another person and you both step the same direction 2 or 3 times and you can't seem to get out of each other's way? Well, that's what me and this wild boar did. I guess you could say I was playing chicken with a pig. I dare not swerve harder than I did because I knew this particular load would shift easily. So I hit my brakes and did my best, but ultimately I hit the yummy beast with my front left bumper. And to be honest, I barely felt the hit. Still, I slowed down to ease onto the shoulder to check out the damage. When I went to downshift, my clutch pedal went straight to the floor with no resistance. Uh-oh. I forced it out of gear and rolled to a stop. The damage. What I expected to find and what I actually found were 2 totally different things. I expected most of my left bumper to be gone and for there to be pig blood and guts all over the undercarriage. Instead, I only found 1 6-inch crack in the bumper that I almost missed, and only a few splashes of blood and meat on my battery box. The only way I knew I really hit him, other than the thump, was the pig-sized dust print on my bumper. So why wasn't my clutch pedal working? Well, I crawled underneath and immediately saw the problem. There's a small hose about as big around as a dime that had snapped off and the fluid had spewed everywhere. My massive intellect and unparalleled mechanical knowledge told me it was probably the clutch line. I'm so brilliant. The road service. I called my company's 24-hour breakdown service, and surprisingly they found a guy who had come out who was just a couple of miles away. Well, what do you know? I guess I'm not in the middle of nowhere after all. He showed up an hour later and took the line off the truck, hoping he would have a replacement back at his shop. No dice. He would have to check in the morning to see if any of the local shops had one. He asked if I needed a ride to a hotel, but the truck was running fine and the APU, auxiliary power unit, which powered my air conditioner, was working, so I just spent the night on the side of the road. There's not really a whole lot going on in that part of Texas at that time of night, other than pig street parties, I guess. Besides, I figured replacing a clutch line would be fairly routine, right? I assumed it would be repaired by morning and I'd be back on the road. I can hear you chuckling at my naivety right now. Knock it off, wise guy. Later that morning, the guy calls me back and tells me they'll have to order the part from Wichita Falls and it wouldn't be delivered until the next day. Great. My dispatcher arranged for someone to come get the load, and I jammed the truck into gear, pulled out from underneath the trailer, and drove the 2 miles to the shop without a clutch. Yeah, I know that wasn't real bright, but it was either that or the repair guy towing me in with a 1-ton pickup, which probably would have been fine, but who knows. Anyway, I got to the shop with only a mild sprinkling in my shorts, due to the fact that I dang near didn't get it yanked out of gear when I pulled into the driveway. Repair shop time. I spent the rest of the day in the truck putting the final edits on the podcast and publishing it. So at least something good came out of all this. Knowing me, had it not been for this breakdown, Trucker Dump 116 might not have been released until next summer. My company asked if I wanted to get a hotel that night, but I passed again, knowing the truck would be fixed not long after the part arrived the next day. Ugh, will I ever learn? The clutch line arrived shortly after noon the next day, and the mechanic set to work on it immediately. It didn't take long to install it, but bleeding the air out of the line was giving him fits. I thought I'd be helpful, so I offered to pump the clutch. Little did I know I'd be pumping the clutch for the next 3 hours. 5 p.m. rolled around and there was no change in the clutch pedal. I could have depressed it just by blowing on it. Unfortunately, the mechanic's been told not to work past 5 o'clock on it. Apparently, it would cost my company more money to pay them after-hour shop fees than I would earn the company if I was rolling down the road. The hotel. So this time I took the company up on their offer for a hotel room. I'd been sweating my butt off for the past 3 hours, and I really needed a shower. And since I was feeling pretty darn good about getting the podcast done, I felt deserving of a Netflix binge. Also, my naivety had vanished since they hadn't made any progress in getting the clutch line bled, so I thought I might be down the whole next day, too. The office lady took me down to the hotel, which looked like a perfect place for a low-budget horror thriller. Empty swimming pool and all. Lovely. Just as my ride pulled away, I realized I'd forgotten to bring a comm check. If you don't know what a comm check is, link in the show notes. I ran out the door waving and screaming, but she didn't see me. Now, normally, if a hotel takes comm checks, they'll have some of them on hand. but of course they had just run out the day before. Nice. I quickly called the shop lady, and she was nice enough to come back and take me back to the truck. These kinds of things happen during Hell Week. It's just one thing after another. Thankfully, the hotel was nicer on the inside than it was on the outside. It even had a fridge and a microwave, which was great because this cheapskate had brought cans of soup so we didn't have to spend money ordering pizza. And much to my delight, the Wi-Fi was just barely good enough to get Netflix, so I binge-watched about the first half season of Gotham. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that show, it revolves around the Batman universe before the superheroes were actually super. It's a really neat idea and a great show. Highly recommended by yours truly, Captain Netflix. The Dispute. The next day, just before the 11 a.m. checkout time, I got a call telling me the truck was done. I got a ride back to the shop and was ready to go. But there's a problem. My company was debating the bill. Apparently, the initial estimate was $800. The final bill came out to be $1,300. Now, this is all because of the extra hours trying to bleed the brakes. The mechanics had called around to numerous different repair shops, and everyone, including the international dealer, was telling them that bleeding a clutch is pretty easy as long as you don't get an air bubble in the line. If you do, it can take forever. Of course it would. I've always been told I was full of hot air, but I had no idea that it could actually seep into the clutch line. I am all-powerful. Let's save your ears and shorten the story here. After a few calls between the shop and my maintenance department, a compromise was made. The shop dropped their road service fee, which they didn't actually have to, and my company reluctantly agreed to pay about $1,100. They weren't happy about it, though. At this point, I didn't care if they were happy or not. I just wanted to get moving. Their bickering had cost me another 2 hours. Well, my desire to get moving and salvage this paycheck was about to be foiled too. The first delay. Now remember, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. We have very little freight around here. I was ready to roll, but the next load couldn't be picked up until the following day. Now I have to admit that this next part surprised me. Trucking in general holds very little excitement for me anymore. So that's why I was a bit shocked when I found myself almost giddy about getting a load to Arizona, despite the fact that I couldn't pick it up ASAP. I hadn't been to Arizona in about 6 years. I guess it's good to know there is still an Ant-Man-sized sense of adventure still inside me somewhere. I drove for about 2 hours to get near the shipper in Plainview, Texas, and then sat for another 24 hours. Thankfully, there was a Walmart that allowed overnight parking, so I got free Wi-Fi and a rotisserie chicken from the deli while I waited. Yes, I spent money on food that wasn't canned. Get up off the floor, would you? I waxed off season 1 of Gotham before hitting the sack. The Arizona load. The next day, I finally got a full day of running in. I took US 70 all the way across from I-27 in Texas to I-10 in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and then stopped for the night at the coolest looking rest area in Arizona. I've included some pictures. Man, there are some great big huge boulders. They're really cool. Link in the show notes. Once there, I had to take a 15-hour break. Now that's 5 hours longer than the mandatory 10-hour break, but I couldn't start my day any earlier since I couldn't deliver the load earlier than my appointment time. An extra 5 hours wasted sucks, but compared to the way the rest of my week was going, it was an outright blessing from God on high. The second delay. My next load picked up a mere 90 miles away in Nogales, Arizona. I think that's how you pronounce it. Which, for those of you who don't know, is a town right on the Mexican border. I got about 2 hours driving in before I sat for another 18 hours just a few miles from the shipper. To make matters worse, when I went into the pilot to shower that evening, I realized I'd left my shampoo and body wash at the hotel. Talk about adding insult to injury. Well, I had 2 pickups in Nogales. The first was set for 10 a.m. and the second for 4 p.m. Now, you truckers can see the problem here. I hope whoever scheduled these loads has a couple of flat tires this weekend, and possibly an allergic reaction to something. For my non-trucking readers, these 2 stops are 6 hours apart. With the advent of the FMCSA's brilliant 14-hour workday, at least 6 of these working hours are probably gone. Thanks, FMCSA. You're great. But things started out good. I drove to my first pickup and they had me loaded in a mind-boggling 15 minutes, which is probably the fastest I've ever been loaded in a border town. So I had high hopes that my second pickup would be ready early, and I'd get moving towards Phoenix, where I plan to meet listener Shannon later that day. That's Holden657 on Twitter. The third delay. Nope. Not only was the load not ready early, but it took them 2.5 hours to load once I finally hit the dock door. So by the time I was ready to roll out, I had about 7 hours in the sleeper berth. If I had taken off, I would have only had about 4 hours to drive before having to take another 10-hour break. I might as well sit for another 3 hours and get the 10-hour break, right? But of course, I've been awake all day again. Now I'm getting yet another fitful 3-hour nap before I'm driving for 11 hours. Or so I thought. I finished up my 10-hour break, and since I was within sight of the Mexican border fence, I checked my entire vehicle for stowaway Mexicans. Yes, really. And drove 3 hours to Phoenix. My next load out is right there in Phoenix, and it was already preloaded on a trailer and ready to roll. Only problem was, I had dropped my load at our yard, and there weren't any empty trailers there. This shipper required an empty trailer in order for me to pick up. The fourth delay. Well, let's make another long part of the story shorter by saying I spent the next 7.5 hours looking for an empty trailer. I finally got lucky when I caught a driver bringing one back into our yard. And because I hadn't been kicked in the ribs enough when I was down, when I went to do my walk-around inspection on the trailer, I couldn't find my tire thumper. I remember having it in hand in Nogales in case I needed to thump a Mexican instead of a tire. I also remember setting it on my side step at some point during the pre-trip inspection. I bet it rolled off the second I put it in gear. Bummer, but whatever. At least I can get moving now. Not so fast, Speedy Gonzales. Since I'm inside the gates of our yard, I now have to go through the inspection bay, which if anyone has heard me complain about before, is about as fast as turtle sex. By the time I got out of there, I had about 2 measly hours on my 14-hour clock, and I felt I needed to use them considering my crappy week. Not a wise choice, I know, but my patience was gone. I got parked just north of Phoenix, which of course meant I missed my meeting with Shannon. Bummer. Like I said, I so rarely get to Arizona. Maybe next time, Shannon, if there is a next time. So now I have this awesome 900-plus mile run from Phoenix to Cheyenne, Wyoming. My company doesn't give me an exact route to run, but they do give me specific fuel locations which often suggest the shortest route and the one they assume I'll be taking. This time they had me fueling in Grand Junction, Colorado, which means I'd take I-17 up to Flagstaff and then US 89, US 163, and US 191 up through Moab to I-70. I was fueling in Grand Junction, Colorado when I got the call. The new dispatcher. I should stop for a minute to explain something. About the time my truck was rolling into the repair shop after the hog slaughter, my former dispatcher was getting fired. So now I'm working with a new guy that I know nothing about. I called someone I trusted at the company and asked them about him. They said, well, he's been here forever. Well, that's a good sign, right? He probably knows everyone in the company, which always helps things along. This was my biggest complaint with my former dispatcher, as he was a fairly new guy. Then I asked what my new dispatcher was like. Lackadaisical was the word description given. Fabulous. What good is it to have a dispatcher that knows everything but is too lazy to pursue what's best for me? I'm going to give this guy a fair shot, but as you can imagine, it didn't start out well, as you're about to see. The chain law. Okay, back to the story. My new dispatcher called and told me I was not allowed to go over the mountains in Colorado since I wasn't carrying tire chains on my truck. And to be honest, I had thought about this as soon as I saw the fuel routing was sending me over I-70. Now, it had been a long time since I'd been in those mountains, but my memory was telling me that Colorado chain law said I had to carry chains from the beginning of October to the end of May. Well, at least I got May right. Crap. It was the beginning of September, not October. Ugh. There's a link to the Colorado chain law in the show notes. The sad thing is, a quick Google search would have saved me a lot of trouble, but I was in such a hurry to make some miles that I hadn't bothered. I'd like to say I learned a lesson there, but rationality and impatience just don't mix. Anyway, I told the new dispatcher that I had seen the chain law sign before I crossed the way station, but the last thing I wanted to do was be delayed by waiting for someone to relay this load off me. So I was just going to take my chances and run across I-70 without tire chains. Now please understand, this is not like me at all. Impatience at work again. The rerouting. The new dispatcher was having none of it. Instead, he rerouted me up through Salt Lake City to I-80. Now, I admit that this non-cusser dropped an SOB on the new dispatcher. Wait a second. I didn't call him one. I just said, well, about the situation. Hello, impatience. It's me, Todd. And normally I'd be fine with this rerouting because it means extra miles for me. But I was trying to get home for a concealed carry class I was going to take on Saturday. I knew technically I had enough hours to get home if everything went fine, but this was going to throw a major wrench into that. Okay, now I know some of you are going, wait. Let me back up. For the record, I really don't care about concealed carry in the least, but the evil overlord does. She spends much of her time alone, and she grew up near Dallas, so she's naturally a bit paranoid about personal safety. So I'm going to take the class just so I don't always have to be moving the gun out of my reach in the car. Besides, I think it'll be a fun thing to do with her. And if an unarmed evil overlord isn't scary enough for you, she's already picked out a Smith & Wesson Laser Max 38 Special with, believe it or not, a laser. As she said loudly in her best Frau Farbissina voice, "I'm in the laser!" There's a link to the gun in the show notes, and there's also a clip of the Frau yelling at her best. Austin Powers, great movie. The shortcut. Enough of that. I finished fueling and grumpily headed back to US 191 in Utah, where I could cut up to Salt Lake City. Instead, I decided I'd be clever and cut a few miles off the trip by following US 191 heading northeast up to I-80 in Wyoming. Now, I did check the atlas, and it was all legal road for trucks. The way I figure it, I had run U.S. highways all the way from Flagstaff, and they were wide open. A bit hilly at times, but nothing major in the way of curves. That's sound logic, right? Yeah, I know. Most of the way was fine, but I eventually hit an extremely windy and hilly stretch near Flaming Gorge Dam where I smoked my brakes on an 8% grade. I had more smoke coming off them than I've had in 19 years of driving. Now I can hear some of you drivers out there saying, if you're doing it right, you should never smoke your brakes. Well, believe me, I know how to drive down mountain grades, but it doesn't matter a lick when your stupid Jake brake won't kick in below 1300 RPMs in 7th gear. I don't care how slow you go, I had to go about 20 to 25 miles an hour for some of these curves. That steep of a grade requires you to brake if you don't want to blow up your engine. I had to pull over for a whole hour before I felt they were cool enough to roll again. It's a good thing I stopped, too. There was a cop sitting at the bottom of the hill. I'm sure that would have been an instant ticket. Thankfully, I made it up to I-80 in Rock Springs without further incident. I delivered later that day in Cheyenne, and lo and behold, my next load was going to Kansas City, which is close to my house, and it was ready a whole 2 days early. Can you believe that? Even better, the receiver would take it as soon as I could get it there. I might make it home for my class after all. Well, this is Hell Week, so that wasn't going to happen. The backtrack. The load was actually ready like dispatch said it would be, but I had to backtrack about 270 miles west to the other side of Wyoming to pick up the load before I could roll towards home. So basically, 270 miles one way plus 270 miles back to Cheyenne is nearly a full day of extra driving. Again, great for the paycheck, horrible for getting home by Saturday morning. Believe it or not, I was actually in Kansas City by around 7 a.m. Saturday morning. I was supposed to grab a preloaded trailer out of the same customer and take it to our yard in Kansas City before I could head home. The head fake. At this point, I had a faint glimpse to the end of Hell Week. You see, I had enough hours to get close enough to home that the evil overlord wouldn't mind driving to pick me up, but only if I didn't have to pick up that extra load and take it over to our drop yard first. I called weekend dispatch and explained the situation. Once again, I was shocked when they told me just to grab an empty and go directly home. Now, the weekend crew usually won't make these sort of snap decisions, especially when it involves 120 deadhead miles. I'm thinking there must have been some sort of note in the computer about the Hell Week I was having to get me home ASAP at all costs. I'm guessing the words Hell Week were part of that message. You think? But remember, this is Hell Week. Its grubby little grip doesn't let you off that easy. Happily, I checked in the receiver and asked for an empty trailer, but of course they didn't have one. Why would they? So at this point, I would have had to go find an empty someplace else, which, as evidenced by my 7.5-hour empty hunt a few days before, would have taken just enough time that I couldn't get close to home anyway. The resignation. At that point, I'd given up. What little optimism I had left was shattered like the glass in the original Die Hard movie.
Shoot the glass.
I decided just to have them unload my current load and reload the one that was going over to the Kansas City yard. By the time it was loaded, I was already over the 14-hour mark. The one thing that went right in all this is there was a truck stop about a half-mile away, which was close enough not to trigger my electronic logs to the driving line. So there I sat, 2 lousy hours from home. I had realized the day before that I probably wasn't going to make the gun class, so we had already canceled it. But I still wanted to get home ASAP, right? The fifth and final delay. So now I can finish this 10-hour break and head home about 6 p.m., right? I'll be home in time for a late dinner. Wrong again. I was now up against the 70-hour rule, and I didn't have enough hours to get all the way home until after midnight. Hang with me, Hell Week is almost over. So if all worked out perfectly, I'd take this load up to the Kansas City yard, grab an empty, and be home by 3 a.m. But alas, Hell Week still has its vice grip-like clutches on me. Of course there aren't any empty trailers at our yard. You knew that was coming. I called night dispatch, and they tell me to take a break and check back in the morning to see if an empty has come in. So much for my get him home ASAP theory. In my nicest tone, I explained to them that I had just taken a 15-hour break and I wanted to go home. To their credit, they hadn't realized I had just been on break, and they sent me to a location where we might have empty trailers. I just love this. They might have empty trailers there. Mini rant. How can a company not know where their trailers are? Why do we truckers have to drive all over God's green earth looking for empty trailers? I mean, they don't lose their loaded trailers. They always know where they are. What's so different about an empty trailer? There, I've said my piece. Because Lord knows this podcast isn't long enough without adding a few sidetracking rants, right? When I arrived at the facility, the security guard said that if they had any empty trailers, they'd be in the parking lot on the right side, and all the loaded ones were on the left. I checked the right side, and they were all loaded. What the? Great. Hosed again. But then I thought he might have just gotten mixed up. He was old after all, and heaven knows I know how easy it is to get confused. By the way, what was that Colorado chain law again? With trepidation, I headed to the loaded lot. Ta-da! There's one trailer on the loaded side, and it's empty. Hallelujah! Thanks for the scare, old man. The home time. I finally got home around 3 a.m., and the evil overlord picked me up to end Hell Week. Well, now that I look at the calendar, it was actually a Hell Week and a half. The evil overlord and I had a great weekend catching up on Marvel movies, Thor 2, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Captain America Civil War. We laughed our butts off to some of our favorite past episodes of Big Bang Theory, and ironically, eating a whole heck of a lot of pork loin. I kid you not.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Wow, man, that blog post was so long I actually had to postpone the feedback delivery. Man, glad he showed up when he did, though, because we've got some. I've got a couple of quickies here to start out with. You know, sometimes I get an email and I'm not sure. It kind of sounds like it's just like a spam bot or something, but I'm not sure. And it looks like, this one looks like a legitimate address. And, you know, I hate to not read somebody's email because I think it's, you know, spam or something, or just somebody leaving a comment. I don't know why they would, for no reason whatsoever. But this is Gregory. And sometimes the wording is weird, so it's like you don't know maybe if they're not from America and they, you know, just aren't, you know, English isn't their first language, or, you know, maybe they're using a headset and it's all screwed up, you know, like Kevin does sometimes. So anyway, I'm just going to read it. Anyway, it says, I just like the valuable... he read Trucker Dump 91, Bungling the 34-Hour Rule. That's explaining the new 34-hour rule and how weird it was. Thank God they got rid of it, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. Anyway, he says, I just like the valuable info you supply for your articles. I'll bookmark your weblog and check once more here frequently. I am reasonably certain I'll be informed many new stuff right here. Best of luck for the next one. Well, Gregory, I wouldn't count on many new stuffs. This is the Trucker Dump Podcast, and I put about once a month is about all you're going to get. But anyway, I appreciate you writing in. Next, I heard from a guy named Clint Shine, and guess what? I used to know this guy. He writes, I am also a truck driver for a company in Missouri. I think we used to hang out hundreds of years ago. I like your blog and just wanted to drop a line. Well, I wrote Clint back and did tell him, yes, that was me. He hung out in our group. He was always a great guy, always a lot of fun. Just one of the guys who hung out with all of us, and gave me many rides to work when I was bumming rides, and just a great guy. And back in the day when we were doing lots of stuff we shouldn't have done, he knows all about that. But anyway, I did write him back, and I haven't heard back from him at all. So if he's out there, Clint, if you're out there, give me another shout. It'd be good to talk to you for a bit. Next up, you guys might remember Brian from Australia. He was a real smart aleck. He sent me a YouTube video, which I thought was kind of neat. It's the world's longest truck road train in Australia, and it's a pretty cool video. So check that out. I put a link in the show notes. Next up, we got a guy calling himself Bird Dog. He listened to Trucker Dump 75, who's a trucker. There'll be a link in the show notes to that. He writes, this is the one I was talking about. Do I call myself a trucker? I don't really like to call myself a trucker. I prefer to say I'm a truck driver. But anyway, I'll read his email. It says, I enjoy the insights in your post. I think that anyone who drives a semi is a trucker regardless of how they dress or act. Also, I don't think that truckers are ignorant, uneducated people. Even though I can't read right now, maybe I am a bit uneducated. He goes on, from what I hear from you and others, it takes a lot of skill and knowledge to be a good driver. Truck drivers are educated in different areas than, say, doctors or lawyers, but they are still educated regardless of stereotypes. Well, Bird Dog, I tend to agree with you. I have accepted my title of trucker. I finally accepted it. Of course, I really didn't have much choice in the matter, because when you name your blog and your podcast Trucker Dump, well, Anyway, I appreciate the kind words. I just wish everyone saw the value of the smarts that we kind of truckers have. Most people don't. They just assume we're all stupid. And to be honest with you, when I see some of the things truckers do, sometimes I think they're stupid too. Anyway, thanks for sharing your thoughts there, Bird Dog. And lastly, we're going to bring it home with Jack. Now, I swore I read this one before, so if I did, I apologize, but it was still flagged as unread, and that I hadn't put it on the podcast yet, so maybe I haven't. Anyway, I had fun writing this guy back, so I'm just going to read it again. If you've heard it, you can fast forward to the end, or just turn me off now. Anyway, Jack says he listened to the tailgating podcast, by the way. I don't remember the name. I don't remember the number on that podcast, but I will put a link in the show notes for you. That was 4 reasons, I think. 4 reasons why that trucker might be tailgating you, I think is what that was called. Anyway, Jack says, there is never a good reason for tailgating, not even when the driver ahead of you is under the speed limit. That's your problem, not theirs. Don't try to rationalize stupidity. Tailgating is stupid. The closer you get, the slower I will go. First, for my own safety, and second, for yours, since you are too numb-minded to figure it out yourself. If you are not getting your paycheck because you are a few minutes late to a destination, that is a problem between your terrible employer and yourself. Find another job. Don't make excuses. Don't take it out on other road users. Keep your distance. Don't be an idiot. Oh boy. I wrote him back. No, Jack, it really isn't my problem. If you, or me for that matter, is impeding traffic, it's not everyone else's problem. It's our problem. For whatever reason, these other people are in a bigger hurry than I am. Why should we hold them up? Personally, my main goal as a driver is not to impede traffic. It's going to take me a while to get around the vehicle in front of me. I wait until there's a large gap in traffic, if at all possible. And if someone's tailgating me, I don't get pissed. I get out of the way. Now, how about this, Jack? How about every driver pay attention to how they're driving and there wouldn't be much tailgating? How would you feel if every trucker adopted your way of thinking? Well, I'm going to go the speed I don't want to go, so I'll just slow down because that car's tailgating me. How happy would you be about that? Now, I think we should take a lessons from the Germans here. I repeat, don't be a hindrance to someone else's progress. If someone wants to get around you, get out of their stinking way and let them get on down the road. That's what I do every day. It really bugs the crap out of me when some pompous jerk thinks he has every right to hold everyone up. Yes, you may be doing the speed limit. That doesn't give you or anyone else the right to hold up traffic to force others to be legal. And as for your statement, the closer you get, the slower I will go, first for my own safety and second for yours since you are too numb-minded to figure it out yourself. Well, Jack, I'm pretty sure I'm not the numb-minded one here. Tell me, how exactly does slowing down so you're actually closer to the tailgater make you more safe? Wouldn't the safer move be to put some separation between you and the tailgater? Even better, switch to a different lane altogether and the tailgater will be off your radar faster than a stealth fighter. That's the safer option. Last time I checked, the further apart two vehicles are, the less likely they are to collide. Yes? Or have the laws of physics changed recently? Sure, it sucks that some drivers, car or semi, get 5 feet from your bumper just because they're in a hurry. As I pointed out in the article, that's not the kind of tailgating I do. I get just close enough for you to take notice of me and figure out what you're doing wrong. If you don't like that, well, tough noogies, I guess. So hey, you can see why I wanted to finish up with Jack. I love that he wrote in with his opinions on it, and I love that I can write back. And I didn't hear back from him, so, I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, do you agree with me on the tailgating thing? Maybe you don't as a trucker. Maybe you think there's absolutely no reason for it. Maybe, you are the one driver who stays back 6 to 7 seconds all the time. If you are, well, Mr. Perfect, write in and tell me about it. truckerdump@gmail.com. Or better yet, leave me an audio comment. That'd be great. So hey, I hope you haven't fallen asleep during this mammoth podcast. If you'd like to tell me about a hell week you've had, you can send an email or a short audio comment to truckerdump@gmail.com or search for TD117 on abouttruckdriving.com and leave your comments there. Now, I doubt you can fit a whole hell week into 140 characters, but if you want to try, my Twitter handle is @ToddMcCann. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. And please let me know if you'd be interested in me starting a Trucker Dump Facebook page. Oh, just saying that gives me the heebie-jeebies. If you know anyone interested in learning about the trucking life, point them toward my book of that same name. As always, thanks for listening. So until next time, stay out of my way.